Hey everyone, it's me again. I'm back in full effect. First, I just want to thank you all for making my most recent video from last month, the one about the student protests at Yale, so successful. I think so far it's had more than 3,000 views, and that is far more than any of my other videos that I've put up in the year or so that I've been doing this has managed to reap. So thanks a lot for showing your faith in me, and of course, if I have my way, I won't let you down. I'll definitely try to live up to that same standard. Today's topic is a piece of news that I consider very welcome. Apparently, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina has finally decided to drop out of the presidential race. I say this not even because I don't happen to share Senator Graham's politics or think that he would make a good president or even merely a good Republican presidential candidate. Rather, I say it because I think that it's one piece of the puzzle of stopping Donald Trump and preventing him from winning the Republican nomination and, God forbid, knock wood, the American presidency. You know, it's funny. Last summer, when Donald Trump first emerged, I was one of those skeptics who thought it damn near impossible that he could actually mount a serious presidential bid. Almost immediately, he began spewing a lot of vitriol against first undocumented immigrants and then various other populations. At various points throughout this campaign, of course, he has made all kinds of inflammatory and outrageous statements, many of them flatly, simply bigoted. Now, I was one of those naysayers at first who were certain that this very tendency of his would sink his presidential campaign. Of course, the main theme of his campaign so far has been the fact that not only has it not failed, it's actually benefited from all of those outrageous statements and absurd policy proposals. I posted my own video on YouTube, you'll remember, just last summer saying, can Donald Trump really be this stupid? I was one of those people who wondered whether he was just in it for the publicity until it occurred to me that it was actually doing damage, or at least running the risk of doing serious damage to his business interests because of all the inflammatory statements that he was making. So I couldn't even say with confidence that it was just because he, wanted to increase his profitability. And yet here he is, all these months later. Donald Trump is still the Republican frontrunner. It makes me want to cry to think that there are that many people out there, even just that many Republican voters, who actually take this man seriously enough that he has managed to be the Republican frontrunner for all these months. And now we actually have to contemplate the possibility that he might actually win the Republican nomination. Seriously? Donald Trump? I remember a few years ago when Donald Trump was throwing his hat into the ring, basically throwing his lot in with the so-called birthers, the people who questioned whether President Obama was actually born in the United States of America. It might have been Thomas Friedman, maybe, who said at the time, Donald Trump has been a buffoon for years, if not decades, but only now has he begun to be actually mean and maybe even evil. That was a few years ago. Now he's saying things that are even worse than that, or at least as bad as that birther nonsense, and yet it's benefiting him. This is really disturbing, y'all. That's why, mainly for the good of the United States of America, and indeed the whole world, which will have to live with the decisions that Americans make about whom to put in the White House next, but also for the sake of the Republican Party itself, I think it's crucial that the other candidates in the race stop splitting the non-Donald Trump vote. Now, a friend of mine has described this Republican primary process as a clown car. You know those clown cars in the circus? Each one holds 20, 30 clowns? That's what the Republican race has looked like so far, with way too many candidates in the game, for a serious, normal, healthy debate and discourse to occur. There are just too many of them. The hell of it is, at least some of them actually really do have merit as candidates and are worth, they're worth taking seriously, but there's just too many of them. They're splitting the vote too many different ways. That's why I think it's critical that at this point, other Republican also-rans, in other words, the candidates who are solo in the polls, they don't really have a meaningful chance of winning the nomination, it's critical that they drop out as soon as possible. More Republican candidates need to follow Lindsey Graham's lead. Now, I've actually looked at some of the numbers on this. According to a USA Today poll from, it looks like December 20th, so just the other day, Donald Trump stands at 34.4% support among Republicans at present. Ted Cruz, 17.1%. Marco Rubio, 12.3%. Ben Carson, 10% even. Jeb Bush, 4.6%. Chris Christie, 3.1%. Rand Paul, 2.4%. And a number of other also-rans. That looks pretty bad, and it is pretty bad, but At least I can say this much. Donald Trump is not enjoying majority support among prospective Republican voters at this point. But here's the silver lining to this dark cloud as I see it. If you add up the percentage support of the next, I think, 6 candidates, you end up with 49.5% support, according to these numbers. So in other words, almost half of all Republican voters are looking, actually a majority of Republican voters, a strong majority of them, are looking at candidates other than Trump. And the next 6 candidates after Trump in the rankings account for almost 50% of the poll support between them. That gives me some hope because with any luck, if, again, these Republican also-rans drop out of the race and allow only maybe 2 or 3 other candidates at most to take on Trump, maybe then the anti-Trump or non-Trump vote won't be split so many different ways that Trump is able to just walk away with what's shaping up to be almost an easy victory. That's really why I rejoice at the news of Lindsey Graham's withdrawal from the race. And I wish a lot of these other folks, particularly those who joined Lindsey Graham at the at the kiddie table in the Republican debate so far. I'm sorry, I just can't get over the fact that these other reject candidates were actually relegated to a totally separate series of debates that almost no one watched. Sorry, I still get a kick out of that one. But, the John Kasich's, the Huckabees, then again, their dropping out isn't going to make that much of a difference because they enjoy such absurdly low support in the first place that they won't free up that many percentage points for, a meaningful non-Trump candidate to take over. That's why it's important that supporters of candidates like Chris Christie and, I'm sorry to say, Rand Paul, I mean, he's the only libertarian-leaning candidate in the race, so as a libertarian, he's the only candidate. I find him the only Republican candidate whom I could really stomach. And, it's too bad to see that he's so far behind. With a heavy heart, I would recommend that people like Rand Paul at least consider dropping out and relatively early in the race so that they can, allow more realistic and likely alternatives to Donald Trump to emerge as soon as possible. I think this Donald Trump nonsense, it's gone on more than long enough. At first it was funny. Well, not for that long, because really he started in with the comments about immigrants being rapists and thieves and murderers and a lot of those other kinds of inflammatory rhetoric pretty early on in his campaign, so I guess it actually didn't stay funny for very long. It's definitely not funny anymore. Now it's just downright disturbing. With him calling for preventing any Muslim immigrants from coming into the country until our leaders can figure out what's going on. I'm sorry. This man has gone from being a joke candidate to a freak show candidate, and he doesn't belong anywhere within light years of the Oval Office. So, Republican candidates, ladies and gentlemen of the Republican primary campaign, I beg you, please consider dropping out. I'm no big fan of, in fact, I'm no fan at all of Ted Cruz either. But, and I hate the fact that I'm even in a position to have to say this, but better him than Trump. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, take my unsolicited advice. Get out of this race as soon as you can. You didn't really stand a very substantial chance of winning the Republican nomination in the first place. Please consider dropping out and falling back for the good of the Republican Party, for the good of the United States of America, and for the good of the entire world. The whole world is watching, folks. Please, please, don't let us down.